special, actually, because we have live in the studio with us, like he's here, like in the studio with us, Pastor Greg Wenhold, who is the former senior pastor of the church that I pastor.
Wait a minute. We have a former pastor of a church with the senior pastor of the church in the same room?
Well, and now he's the pastor of the church again, but not the senior pastor.
So you said just now, you said senior pastor in the room with, and he's now a pastor of the same church.
He's called, I believe, support staff pastor.
Yeah, we had trouble figuring out.
Yeah, we did.
What I was
we wanted to call you emeritus, but you're like, no way.
Nah.
Okay,
you were
so
having it.
Senior pastor who retired or resigned.
Technically retired,
went away for 5 years. Yeah. Tara Beth's pastor, and he's back.
He's back. Look who's back.
Wow.
Back.
And in a pastoral role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing anything and everything I need to do. So
he is an incredible support to me. And he was my pastor for many years. He mentored me. He taught me so many things about being a pastor. He's the reason I went to seminary.
Wow.
He's the reason I went to seminary. You know, I often call Good Shepherd my greenhouse, like nursery.
Okay.
Like you think about a baby tree growing. They were a safe space for me to spread my wings and figure out what pastoring and preaching looks like.
What was your first assignment?
Before that?
No, what was your assignment at the church under the leadership of Pastor Greg?
High school ministry leader.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just knocked everything out of the park when Tara Beth got to Good Shepherd.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was found by one of our staff, Janice Rubin, good friend to both Tara Beth and I. And when Tara Beth came on staff, Janice came to me and she said, Greg, can you spend some time on Sunday night, just sneak into the room where Tara Beth is teaching our kids? And I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. So that Sunday night I went, and I'm like, the next day I said, Janice, like, I get it. And I was doing some co-leader pastoring with another individual. And I said to that person, you need to go also. He went the next week. And we both said to each other, we got to put her in. Somewhere, some way, this community's got to hear from this voice. And Tara Beth began preaching and just leading. And it was more than just student ministry by that point.
Yeah,
Wow.
so I probably was 24-ish years old.
It's hard to believe. That's amazing.
It's amazing. And they asked me to preach. And at the time, like, Good Shepherd felt so huge to me.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
well, it was.
It was. And edit that out. Stanley catastrophe.
We're making it work for Chaz.
Yeah. All right, let's put this back over there.
Right over here. If you want to drink, just holler.
Yeah. Okay.
Let me take a drink out of it.
All right. So I'll start that sentence again. So I was 24, and you guys put a 24-year-old who had only done undergrad a bachelor's of divinity, basically, and you put me in, coach.
You had just so many gifts from God, and we knew it. And Good Shepherd's a unique community that people, they want substance and they want depth, but they want freshness. And when you started speaking, it was like a buzz. Hey, have you heard Tara Beth preach yet? And it was like a great moment.
Now we have another young seminarian, Max.
Yeah.
There's kind of that same effect with folks. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, we're going to get into so the dynamic here. The reason for having Pastor Greg on the podcast is because he's a pastor who has left the ministry. I mean, boy, that's hard to say. I don't even like saying it. Left the ministry.
Well, he left his local church call because he went into a different kind of ministry.
Yeah. But he left the pastoral. He left his church to do something else, and then he came back under a lead pastor who he had mentored.
Yeah,
and that's not a usual story.
Yeah,
it doesn't sound like a usual story to me.
No, it's not. And we're going to talk a lot about it in the next episode.
Yeah, right.
First, let's let our listeners get to know you. You've been pastoring what?
45 years.
45 years was your anniversary to ordination.
Yeah, just recently.
Yeah. Which is remarkable to think about. How? Now I know your dad was a
OBGYN.
He was a physician. Yeah. How does a physician's son become a pastor?
I grew up in a pretty suburban community outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And one thing that I look back on is I had a mom who guided us in our faith journey without it being parochial or heavy-handed. Moments more like, hey, if you want to use the car this Friday night to go out on that date, you'll be in church on Sunday morning. Those kind of moments. And so a very suburban, emerging, during the 60s kind of mentality. And so when I'm going to church every Sunday, I end up then at a small liberal arts college, pretty social, was the president of my fraternity. And
you social?
Yeah.
That's
it was
shocking.
Pretty, that was probably my major.
Pastor Greg at our churches and stuff is the guy. You're the one, you pop from office to office to office, and you're chatting with everyone, and you're bouncing around on Sunday mornings.
It's important.
He's very high energy pastor.
So what ends up happening is I could stay out till 3-4 in the morning on a Saturday night. I'd still be in church on Sunday morning. And my fraternity brothers, they were all like, what are you doing? Who are you? There was something going on inside of me. Obviously, God was shaking it up and moving, and had not a clue what I was going to do with a philosophy degree. What do you do with a philosophy degree?
Sell Christmas trees.
Yeah, that's it. And
no, that's a true story.
Go on and get your PhD or something like that. That's about it. Yeah.
Your son was it?
Well, my son wanted to buy a Christmas tree while he was in college, and the guy who is selling him the Christmas tree said, "Oh, you're at Olivet? Yeah. What's your major? Religion, philosophy." He says, "Oh, so you're going to sell Christmas trees when you get out of college?"
Never did. Probably got close to it. One of my professors in college said, "Why don't you go to seminary?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's like an advanced degree."
Sure.
I figured I'd do that and see where it took me. So went through 4 years in the tradition that I came out of in the Lutheran Church. You did 2 at school, a year in the field, back at school. And then all of a sudden people are saying, well, you're going to get ordained, right? And I'm like, I didn't know if that was part of this journey, but yeah, okay. So let's do it.
Wait a minute. So you didn't have a sense or a call to ministry. You're just going to school. And the school you're going to is a school.
Sounds like ministry chased him.
It's the subtleness of God pursuing, knowing that He's got you anyway, and so just taking you down the path. And it's not a primrose path; it's a path of focus. Looking back, I can see every piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, but okay. But typically, well, at least in our tradition, a young person gets a call, and then that narrates their journey, right? The call does. But you just enjoyed the study. You decided to go to grad school.
Enjoying the journey.
You were just enjoying the journey, right?
And it was good.
Okay, when in seminary did you realize that you might go into the pastoral ministry? Not in seminary.
Step by step.
Wow.
Ended up graduating and recognizing, hey, there are some churches that I could do life with for a while. And I got to be real honest with you. I thought I was going to do this for 10 years and then move on to something else. And
really?
So, yeah, it was a reality. And so the linchpin for me is when I met my wife and falling in love and being a pastor. It was just a unique situation. And
his wife and your wife would be 2 peas in the pod.
Really?
They are so similar.
Somewhere, though, so along the journey, she called me into focus and she said, 10 years, are you kidding me? You would actually have that thought in your mind that God would do that to you or with you. And that's probably the moment when I would say my awakening happened.
Okay.
So I was ordained already, and I probably wasn't fully feeling the call.
Okay.
Wow.
This is important.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
Because we tend to get pretty prescriptive.
Yeah, we want things so neatly packaged up.
Well, even for others.
Yeah.
No, so you can't, we've run into this story more than once. You can't accidentally go into the ministry, right? And you're not saying that,
no.
Right? But you can't go to the ministry unless you have a overwhelming call such that you could not do anything other. But that is not your experience.
No, I wouldn't say that I was just flippant about it.
I know.
Just kinda,
it's made it sound flippant. I agree.
Yeah. I mean, there was a deep call. I just hadn't identified who was calling me.
Oh, there we go.
I was
That's
being
a really
called
good way.
into lifestyle that frankly, it was good. I was
following Jesus.
I was having fun.
So for you, like your sense of call was, I'm going to live in the ways of Jesus. I'm going to study. I'm going to be faithful in my studies. I'm going to follow Jesus where Jesus goes. And you weren't thinking about it as a career path.
Not totally. As a stepping stone of growth, and didn't know where I was really headed.
Yeah, yeah.
I always thought that maybe I was heading toward that professor journey. Like, okay, I'll do this for 10 years. Yeah. It's an advanced degree.
Well, because you do have your doctorate as well.
Yeah, a doctor of ministry, though, not a PhD.
Right.
So actively, after I did feel my call, went on and got a doctor of ministry at Drew University in Madison, New Jersey, which was a really exciting time. But so to rewind, when I met Ida Lynn, my wife, she really put on my heart this moment, not in a judgmental way,
right,
but a guiding way.
Yeah,
to say there's got to be more. And through that moment of awakening, I would say that is when I gave my total heart to a Lord that I love and to a church that I knew I was going to serve for the rest of my life.
Wow.
Were you in the ministry when you and your wife had this conversation?
Yes.
Were you already in the pastoral ministry?
I was ordained already.
You already did. So, yeah. But this is
it sounds odd.
No. This is amazing. It's fascinating.
Because we ought to give God liberty to work how God works.
Amen.
There ought not to be a single prescriptive path, experiential. I mean, God works in all kinds of ways. That's why I didn't want to run off this, because there's other pastors out there who are probably reflecting. You know, my call wasn't the typical prescriptive call. I kind of was led gently. Can we say it that way?
Yeah.
Led gently into the ministry, which is
what Scott McKnight calls the million gentle nods of the soul.
Right. Yeah. In all of this, you're following Jesus.
Sure.
Right. But you just hadn't connected the vocational component yet.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And
where were you serving at that time? Was that when you were at King of Prussia in Pennsylvania?
No, I started out at a really rural church outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
After the suburban rings of Philadelphia gets rural, like it does in a lot of places. Here in Chicago, it's the same way. And I was serving a church and was making a move to a really large Lutheran community, really close to where I grew up. And I was on staff as the student pastor. And I did my due diligence there. And that's right at that time, my life, it was still really social. And, even looking back, I would probably still be Saturday night, active, crazy, preach on Sunday morning, engage people. Relationally, I was still in the game big time. I have many friends still from that first church I served, and went on then to staff ministry at a large church. But I think I hit full stride when I was tapped to go to a church in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, another Good Shepherd. And they had known me from seminary as I was a student pastor there, just doing work.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, at that church, that's where I think everything hit stride. Because now I am a pastor of a church that can grow and deepen its path with God, and people wanted that. And they had some starts and stops. And so for 12 years, I was able to be there. During that time, though, we kept praying for more, because I was not, I can do the liturgy from, like I say, I can do smells to bells. I can do all of it, from incensing everything to
to the chanting.
Yeah, I can do it all.
Yeah.
But there was something deep in my soul, and we had started a band, and every time that it would engage worship at the church in King of Prussia, people would say, "This is cool," or they'd say, "Are you looking for a pathway out of here?" They weren't really too excited about that, but it had steam, it had momentum. But I kept praying, God, you have to lead someplace. And so along the way,
I mean, that's crazy innovative for a Lutheran pastor in a Lutheran church in Pennsylvania in the 90s. This is the early 90s?
late 80s.
Late 80s.
Early 90s.
Early 90s. I mean, that's scandalous.
So this
to
is
bring in a band.
Yeah.
For the Lutherans.
This is high church liturgy?
Yeah, it wasn't, and the church wasn't as high. I mean, Lutherans at that point were all over the map.
Okay.
You know, from very folksy to very high church.
Okay.
And that was acceptable and it was okay. And it felt good. And the church I was ordained in was highly relational and connective. Pastors of other congregations would pick up the phone and say, "Let's have lunch. I want to spend time with you. I want to nurture you." So it was a great place to learn how to be a pastor and a great denomination. As time progresses, though, it gets more fragmented and more isolated. So that if you weren't doing the pathway the way everybody else was,
right,
you were seen as maybe a rebel. And I never wanted to be a rebel without a cause. I wanted to be somebody who was leading to the best of my ability and really felt, this connectivity to church in a fresh way.
Okay.
So along that way, as we were getting into maybe year 10, we were intensifying our prayer, both Idalyn and I, because she saw it too. Our kids were young. And all of a sudden, a church in Sioux Falls, South Dakota got my name. They cast net. Lutherans are pretty parochial in the bishop at large will say where you're heading.
Right.
Churches that are more like what Good Shepherd is about look for their own candidates.
And get in trouble for it.
Hey, it's the great journey, man. It's what we're cut out to be. And so I end up in this call process in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I had never been west probably of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I'd never crossed the Mississippi River, and that is like the hinterlands to me.
Right.
But I'm feeling God say this is pretty cool. And so I went through this call process, and I got to the moment where, and by this point, let me kind of rewind and say, I'm feeling the call fully. So I had gotten through that time of desert walking of who am I, a wandering Aramean. No, I get who I am.
Okay.
And I get where my call is. And now I want to experience it fully. So I ended up, I think I was the fourth candidate of this church. And they called me up and they said, "Sorry, we're going to 3 and you didn't make the cut."
Oh, wow.
So I wasn't really upset. I had not gotten to the point. I think 3, you were going to go out to South Dakota to visit. The next day, I walk into church and there's an envelope in my mail slot from Good Shepherd. And they were looking for their next senior leader as well. So it's like 1994.
Okay.
And so I had my things together. They were the days before digital engagement. So I just packaged it all up, changed it up, sent it off to Good Shepherd, and things really started to cook.
And didn't 2 of the people in the search committee randomly show up at your church on a Sunday?
They did, but that was part of the process.
Okay.
What I had come out here to the Chicago area. One of the kids that grew up in the church met a girl outside of Chicago, and I was doing a wedding in Rockford.
Okay.
And so I told them I was going to be there, and they came to visit me in Rockford.
Oh, okay.
And we were supposed to fly back to Philadelphia, and they said, "Well, can you change?" Well, I had a puddle jumper from Rockford to O'Hare, and I was going to fly back to Philly. And so what ends up happening is we rent a car and drive down to Naperville, and we worship. kind of incognito.
So you
but
check
we
out the church.
Yeah, it was really cool. They were excited. We were. And then they did come to visit me in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And it just, that got a lot of momentum. But it was really, it was easier for me to make that move than for my wife.
Sure.
Just family.
How long had you been in King of Prussia?
12 years.
You were, as a senior pastor?
Yeah. Only pastor.
Only pastor.
We had a few moments with others on staff.
But that was your home.
Yeah.
Philadelphia area. For the
Correct.
record, King of Prussia sounds like a really funny name of a town to me.
Valley Forge, where Washington spends the winter at Valley Forge, it's right next to it.
Yes. So I looked it up on Google Maps while we're talking to see where in the world is King of Prussia. It's outside of Philadelphia, right? So now, 12 years there. Now you're here in Naperville.
Yeah. So,
and your wife was thinking, I don't know about this.
Yeah. So the journey gets kind of even more unique and trusting of God. So we hit here, and Good Shepherd had just gone through a really difficult time.
Okay.
An 11-month pastorate that didn't work, and then a year of interim while they were searching for their next leader, and that was me.
Okay.
So I enter in. Finances are really difficult. The building, even though it was 8 years old at that time, looked like people had used it hard. And so there was a lot of refreshment that needed to have. Our student ministry pastor left. So I ended up doing student ministry on Sunday nights. And I really almost got to the point of burning, like completely out, flaming out. And yet God was good at that time, and we got through it, got the finances under control. We were able to bring another pastor on staff and kind of stabilize things, and the growth started to happen again. It had happened on another pastor's watch we just had, Pastor Sig Berg, came and preached. The church was like going crazy, and then he transitioned off. An 11-month pastorate just almost torpedoed the ship.
The church I went to as a 26-year-old had an 11-month pastor before me. And when I got there, and I've shared this, the district superintendent in our tradition didn't tell me that the church wanted to close.
Yeah.
They wanted to close. Yeah. And he wouldn't let them close. And he didn't tell me that I was pastoring a church of people who didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
Right. So we just went to work. Right. Yeah. So you can have a 12-month, a year pastorate that really does harm to a local church. Right.
It had probably cut the worshiping attendance in half.
And that's the church you decided you should go to.
So I was excited. I was excited for what they're doing. They were doing some edge work in worship, and things were just everything I had prayed with my wife for. This church was, even in the midst of struggle. And we went through some really tough financial times. I remember walking into an office one evening, and all our finance people are in there, and they have stacks on the table. And I'm like, what are you doing? And they said, we're deciding what bills to pay.
Right.
I did at one point think that along the way they were going to come chain lock the door, the bank was, and we were going to be out of business at that site. But God was good, and you stay faithful in these moments, and the journey was just sweet. Now, with that said, things are moving forward. We've got it going. The church I went to as student pastor was one of the largest churches in the denomination at that time, and it's on the East Coast. And their pastor was my mentor.
Okay.
And so he called me up one day and he said, "I want you to come be my successor." And I'm like, I just have been here like for 2.5 years.
Right.
And he said, I need you to do this. He had been the only senior pastor for 46 years at that church. And he handpicked me to come be his predecessor.
You almost...
Yeah, he was my predecessor.
You almost need that if you've been a pastor for 46 years.
How do you say no to that?
Whoever follows him has to have his favor.
Yeah.
Right?
So I say after prayer, I believe this is what God wanted me to do. And I still to today do, as convoluted as this next segment is.
I have these stories too. Like my story is so convoluted.
I want to hear this story.
So I go, we move back. It's really close to where I grew up.
Wait, you moved back?
Yeah.
Oh, you left?
I left after 3 years.
Good Shepherd?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, this is
just
great.
Wait for it. Buckle up.
Okay.
So anyway,
all right.
So
you
this
go back.
one gets crazier. Yeah. So we move our family back, and family's back there. It was the community right next to where I went to high school, and so I knew things. This is my mentor. We've done life together, and just things are great. And all of a sudden, I get there. And he's supposed to transition while I'm there, the final days, and I'm celebrating him. I went to him and I said, I think you should still be around. I really want you to be around, similar to what we're doing right now. Right. I trust you. Let's do it. And all of a sudden, he said, well, I want you to be in this office while you're here and just kind of hang out. And I have a date set. I'm not sure of it yet. But the longer this happened, I started to realize he didn't want to leave.
So he invited you to succeed him, and he wasn't sure when he was leaving.
Correct.
But you didn't know that when you went there.
No way. I trusted. So in Jim Collins' first book, Built to Last, Before Good to Great, he has this moment of, I think it's Trans World Airlines, TWA, where that CEO deep six the company because he never wanted anyone else to have what he had. I'm like, thinking to myself, why didn't you tell me this? But he didn't know. He obviously was not in touch with what was going on inside of his crucible of ego craziness. Yeah. So it got really weird. My life was threatened a couple times. Had a police officer who lived next door to me. He was a detective in a neighboring community. And he called me up one night and he said, Greg, there are people that are casing your house.
And so was this because they didn't want you to be this replaced? They didn't want to lose their pastor.
Yeah, and he didn't want to leave, and he didn't want anyone in, because we were starting to get some momentum, and he did not want someone else to take his place.
This is really fascinating. Yeah. It wasn't him who threatened your life.
Well, I found out later on that I don't know a lot about that. What I decided to do out of prayer. And we were only there for 18 months. So I call this my missionary journey. I decided to take the high road. I didn't want to blow the church up, but I knew we couldn't stay. It was really getting pretty intense on my wife and on me. Little sleep, crazy life. And so I decided to see if there were some other calls that were out there. And I was working with a few churches in Florida. And then all of a sudden, Good Shepherd called.
The church you just left.
Yeah. Now the staff pastor who we had brought on while I was there became the senior pastor.
All right.
And we met Baltimore. I drove down to Baltimore. They flew in. We met incognito back here, like under wraps. And the whole time we're praying, God, could you do something new? And so we ended up recognizing that God wanted me to come back and to do a co-senior leadership. Everyone said we were going to blow the church up.
Yeah. So now there's no template here that there's no template that we're looking at here. This is. But this is not how this is
done. Here's the genesis, though. Here's the birthplace.
And it worked beautifully.
Of why I can do what I'm doing with Tara Beth.
Yeah.
Is I learned, and Tara Beth knows this, having an acronym that was taught to me when we started this co-senior leadership about ego, that you have to be careful. It will edge God out every time. Or think Ken Blanchard in his Lead Like Jesus book or whatever says there's another, you can exalt God only. And you have to choose which ego you're going to have. And we chose to exalt God only.
All right. So what year is this that you come back and begin co-pastoring?
The millennium, 2000.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's no tension or anything going on in the world at that time either, right?
That was great. Yeah.
Okay.
And all the church judicatories, the bishops of both the Pennsylvania and here in Chicago were saying, you guys are going to blow this church up. And we're like, we'll be okay. God's got it. And for 20 years, we did that together. And I can tell you truthfully, we never had one blow up. Mm-mm. It was like being married to an additional person.
Yeah.
You trusted. If we ever had anything that we didn't agree on, we'd say, hey, let's meet again tomorrow.
Well, and you guys have very different gifts.
Sure.
Very different personalities, very different style of pastoring. And so the way that you were able to just delegate different, I mean, you oversaw certain departments and he oversaw certain things. You were incredibly gifted administratively. He had a heart for missions and pastoral care.
And knowing everyone's name.
Yeah.
But that never intimidated me, nor did my gifts of vision or finance or any of that administrative intimidate him. Mm-mm. And so it was hand in glove and it was perfect.
It was.
As perfect as ministry can get.
Okay, this is a credit to him. He's pastoring this church. He's your successor here. And so it's his call, isn't it?
Yes.
And he invites you back.
Yes.
I mean, that's to his credit as well, right?
Yeah, I came back. I mean, we could drill down into some of the weeds, but just to help you understand how intense it got, before we said yes, I came back for a week and I met with as many people as I could to assure them that I'm not just a hit and go.
Yeah.
Like I'm not coming back to leave in another 3 years.
Well, because that's what you had done.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. I'm like liable for any. Yeah. I remember sitting across the table at a lunch from one person, and during this time he's screaming at me, "Why'd you leave? Why'd you let us down?" And I'm like, okay. And I just knew that we're in this Advent series we're in this week. We're preaching on peace. Mm-hmm. And I knew I had to find that peace in my soul. If this was what God wanted, it was going to happen.
Mm-hmm. But I know what that feels like. I left the church I'm pastoring now. I mean, I resigned and was gone. I had to leave for completely different circumstances. And I thought, I'm done here. I've betrayed the folk. Yeah. They're never going to have me back. Yeah. And 6 months later, they called me as their lead pastor. I thought, how does this happen? Right?
Interesting.
Yeah. So
coming back with Tara Beth too, this is my third time.
Yeah.
They joke about that too.
Are you
I'm not called. I'm like more Tara Beth's hired gun. I'm just there to help. But people joke about it.
Well, okay, but in the Lutheran tradition, they don't do co-pastors.
No.
Very, very few churches do co-pastors.
Correct.
Yeah. So this had to be this. The church had to sign off on this.
Yes, they did.
But and this is so, for those of you, I know we have some listeners that know Pastor Greg, but this is so Pastor Greg. You always, and all the things, see things so differently than your average person. And you don't follow the template in most things. and I mean for the better. You've always been my goodness, introducing a band to, a Lutheran church in the 80s, to co-pastoring, to just so many parts of the journey.
Okay, so we had to keep talking about. So there's so much to talk about from here.
I'd love to hear, for our listeners who are, maybe young pastors and they're on a journey where maybe they've had some zigzags.
Yeah.
What's your pastoral word to them in closing?
It truly stay the course, stay faithful. That, even though the storms rage, you build your foundation on the rock, Jesus. And our Lord does not let us down in ministry ever. We'll go through some real tough times. Pastoring is not for the faint of heart, and we know that. But God will provide blessing upon blessing. And that's what I have felt in my life. And as we get back into this next time, I'll tell you about a phone call that I received when I was back at Good Shepherd from someone on the staff of the church that turned on me.
Ooh.
I have so many questions.
Oh, man,
about
folks, you're going to have to wait a whole week for that one. What a cliffhanger.
Yeah, this is going to be a 3-parter.
Yes, this is fabulous. Well, friends, thanks so much for listening in to the Pastor's Table. This is fun.
This is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Big honor to be here with you.
Hey, we're grateful to have you.
Well, we believe in it.
Thank you for listening to the Encounter Faith podcast. This podcast is a service of G. Shep Productions from Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Naperville, Illinois. All rights reserved. If you're in the area, we'd love to meet you on a Sunday morning at our 9 a.m. or 10:45 services. At Good Shepherd, we are inviting everyone to walk together in the calling of Christ for a life of eternal impact. This podcast is produced and hosted by me, Ross Cochran. And our theme song is Wake the Earth by 1111 Worship. Thank you for listening. We'll talk again soon.